This was the craziest week for AMD stock investors. We can see the stock was up nearly 30%. Unfortunately, on Friday, though, the stock did pull back nearly 8%. And on today's episode, I want to take a closer look at everything. OpenAI's deal, Trump breaking AMD stock, and some other interesting reports coming out for this company. Let's take a closer look in today's episode. All right. So first, thank you for joining us for another AMD Weekly episode here. This is, I think, episode 5, where I tend to look at all the weekly news impacting AMD stock. AMD is definitely a big position in my overall portfolio, and this is a stock that I believe is a multi-bagger. Now, I want to say I always thought that AMD had the opportunity laid out ahead of itself to be a multi-bagger from where was that just a few months ago? It could easily be a $500 billion company in the next few years. But with this OpenAI deal, I believe the road and the information that we know makes that road to $1 trillion a lot smoother. It's not a guaranteed, but I do believe the OpenAI deal is that deal that could make this company be $1 trillion player in the next few years. And that from here is still kind of a 3-bagger. So I still believe AMD is a multi-bagger opportunity. And I'm actually even more bullish on this company now, thanks to the data, which is so interesting, right? Because I actually feel that the market now is a little bit more bearish on AMD after this news. There have been some, in my opinion, long-term shareholders on my chat that have recently sold out of AMD because they say they're too worried about the future. And to me, the future seems a lot more clearer now with this deal. So let's start off with that, right? So OpenAI on October 6th, which was Monday, came out with this massive partnership with AMD of a strategic partnership to deploy 6 gigawatts of AMD GPUs. The first gigawatts starting in the second half of 2026 with AMD's MI450. Now, the MI450 is the first time AMD is going to have their Helios rack, a full stack solution of connecting pretty much 72 GPUs together, which is crucial for the current AI market that we're in. And this is intact because we do know that about a gigawatt data center equals for Nvidia about a $40 billion revenue. AMD has a lot lower revenue margins than Nvidia. But even if you kind of put those lower margins, that could still be somewhere between around a $30 billion in revenue per gigawatt. Just to put that in perspective, that's more revenue than AMD did in the full fiscal year of 2024. That's more revenue the company did in the trailing 12 months. Now, before we continue, I found this super quick method for getting new ideas on stocks to research, and I want to show you how I do it with Moomoo, our sponsor today. Quick heads up though, the stocks I'm showing are just for demo, not investment advice. You know me, I'm huge into the semiconductor and AI market, but I don't know all the stocks. So here on Moomoo, I can go to markets, stocks, investment themes, and start looking at all the different themes. Some AI focus, some outside my wheelhouse. Let's look at this, Nvidia's portfolio, and see all the companies Nvidia owns right now. We can also do this for ETFs and find ETF-based ideas on themes that we enjoy right now. Outside of this cool feature, we have partnered together and have an amazing sign-up offer for the semiconductor AI community. Right now, Moomoo is giving new US users up to $1,000 in free NVIDIA stock just for opening and funding an account. Up to $100 in cash reward. And as if that wasn't enough, you also get a massive 8.1% APY on your cash for limited time. Click the link below to learn more and take advantage of Moomoo's amazing offer today. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this deal with AMD and OpenAI, and I'm going to compare it and share the difference between AMD's and NVIDIA, because there are some differences. Some are good, and in my opinion, some might not be as bullish as some investors might see it. But under this definite agreement, OpenAI will work with AMD as a core strategic compute partner to drive large-scale deployments of AMD's technology, starting with the AMD Instinct MI450 series and rack-scale AI solutions and extending to future generations. So this deal comes with various parts. First, it's a groundbreaking equity structure. So AMD is granting OpenAI warrants for up to 10% of the company, with vesting tied to two things. First, the deployment milestone, so for each gigawatts, but secondly, based on AMD stock price. For example, the final vesting tide is actually going to happen when AMD reaches $600. Right now, AMD's stock is sitting at roughly $214. $600 would be roughly a three bagger from here. And that would make this company a $1 trillion company. So this is expected to be by 2030. So both AMD and OpenAI have made some form of agreement that they believe it is possible, right? Because if both partners have to agree, there has to be a probability of success. They both believe with some probability that AMD stock can reach $600 by 2030. To me, that is amazing returns, right? A three baggers. Typically, the market doubles in what, 6 to 7 years? This is tripling in less than five. So this is already a big opportunity. Now, like I mentioned, this is going to be not only for the MI450, but the future generations. The company giving up 10% of its equity is some see as a bearish case, right? But right now, the company's sitting at a market cap of $300 billion. If this deal goes through and increases the overall opportunities for AMD, being a $1 trillion company and giving $100 billion to OpenAI and $900 billion to to AMD investors, I'm okay with that. I would think most investors of AMD are okay with that, right? Would I rather own a $300 billion company, or would I rather own a $900 billion company, even though a trillion dollar company, but only owning about $900 billion of it, right? So the math makes sense. I think as a long term, this is very great for AMD stock investors. Now, the main reason is obviously OpenAI needs money, right? And what's most likely going to happen is OpenAI is most likely going to end up selling these warrants, these shares, to end up purchasing the form of GPU capacity it has. I don't believe OpenAI is going to end up holding much of the shares. Now, that could create some form of selling pressure whenever they tend to unload. And it is something that investors should consider and could create some volatility. But again, that's more going to be noise in the short term. And I do believe in the long term, the opportunities there. The other thing that I think this is very crucial for AMD stock investors that I don't hear many people talking about. One of the biggest reasons Nvidia leads in this market is the strength in the supply chain, right? The strength of the supply chain where NVIDIA can go to one of its partners, one of its manufacturers, somebody who works on a product and say, look, I need you to build a supply chain line for me. I know the supply chain line will cost you about maybe 50, $100 million, but I need you to do it because I have tons of orders for you. Those partners of NVIDIA's would say yes, because they know NVIDIA has that demand. They're not going to want to skip the beat. But prior to this AMD and OpenAI announcement, AMD didn't not have that same stain, right? The market doesn't really have much AMD solutions. So if AMD was to go to a partner that had supply chain, that one of their supply chain partners, they might do a little bit of improvements, but never build massive lines, never reserve massive amount of inventory because AMD never had that backing. But now with this backing with OpenAI, which is easily going to be over hundreds of thousands of GPUs, those partners now have a reason to trust AMD and they have a reason to make AMD's supply chain even better. So for me, I think it's definitely a great win for AMD, even if they're losing 10%. They're losing 10%, but in the long term, it seems like this company is going to be more valuable. It's going to help improve the supply chain trust with AMD and its partners, because now AMD has some form of paper. Look, I have these massive orders. You're not going to want to miss being my supply partners and building some of these lines for me. And then overall, with this, it's also going to push other players. If OpenAI is using AMD solution, maybe AMD is good. Maybe I should also think about using it, right? So that's the big wins, in my opinion, with this deal. Now, The deals do differ between Nvidia and AMD. First is just the size. Nvidia's deal is larger, 10 gigawatts versus AMD's 6 gigawatts. But taking a look at the current market share, it's actually a lot better than AMD's historical market share, right? AMD's market share in the AI GPU market is less than mid single digits right now, right? But here, total of this deal is 16 gigawatts. Six out of that 16 gigawatts is expected to be AMD's solution, AMD's chips. That's a little bit closer to 40% market share just from this customer, right? So interesting as well to see how the market share is shifting a little bit. Now, I'm still a huge Nvidia bull. I believe Nvidia is going to dominate this market, but just seeing the strength of AMD, it is definitely now a easier road to pave that AMD is going to gain market share. Now, there also is some difference between the financial structure. Nvidia is investing in OpenAI and is going to get equity in OpenAI. So for that, that's an asset of them outside of OpenAI also being a massive customer. For AMD, they're getting OpenAI as a customer, but they're giving off equity. Completely the opposite of NVIDIA's deal, right? I think it's a deal that needs to be done because unfortunately, AMD is not the number one player. This is a deal that number two, number three players make, but it's still a good deal for the long term opportunity. First player gets to make the deals. They are the ones that get to run the contract. As a second or third player in this AI market, you do have some strength, but not as strength as number one as we see. Overall, again, this just helps out the technology and software ecosystem with their supply partners. It helps AMD's GPU and software platform extend into other developers as well, which again could be a long term opportunity. So for me, AMD's and OpenAI's deal is a big, big win. So as you can tell, I'm extremely, extremely bullish for this deal. And I'm not the only one. After this deal, AMD actually saw a lot of price target hikes. And actually, let's go to Moomoo for one of my other favorite platforms here. We can kind of look at price target hikes. Since that deal, AMD has received numerous price target increase. TD Cowen increased their price target to 270 from 195. Philips Securities 255 from 120. We have Citi increased their price target to 215 from 180. Wells Fargo 275 from 185. We have Rosenblatt 250 from 200. We have Goldman Sachs 210 from 140. We have Piper Sandler, 240 from 190. And you have a lot and a lot of similar increases throughout the map. A lot of ones I didn't mention upgraded either their price targets, and ratings overall. Like I mentioned, I believe this deal will overall help AMD become a $1 trillion company in the long term of things. Now, some might be wondering, Jose, isn't this now time to be bearish on the stock? Again, I like the data coming in. AMD has been a nice position in my overall portfolio. We've been talking about AMD most recently in just this year, right? The stock was sitting under $100. We talked about it here heavily. And I am one that with this news, I believe it's not a scary one to dollar cost average over time. Yes, volatility happens. And yes, stock prices can go down. The perfect example was how recent news between United States and Trump and China have created some volatility in the tech market. So recently, Trump announces new 100% tariffs on Chinese exports after stock market sell-off. And this is obviously going to impact the semiconductor and the technology market alliance. Some might say, Jose, why would this impact these players, right? Why would it impact AMD? Why would it impact the semiconductor industry? Aren't most of the chips made in Taiwan? That is true. But usually chips don't come to the United States as the finished good. The finished good is either a laptop, it's either a server, it's either a handheld device, a PC rig. And that's where AMD, even though it's an AI company, a good portion of its revenue still comes from the consumer and enterprise space, the embedded market. All those markets are finished goods that usually end up being made in China or that part of the world. So this negative friction, this tension is going to create even a lot more volatility for the overall stock. Now, I'm actually pretty excited for it to go down because, like I mentioned, dollar cost average. I think this is more short-term news, and short-term news can get even worse and worse throughout the upcoming weeks and maybe even the upcoming months. But again, during the long term of things, I do see this now being a $1 trillion player. So just be careful with it. Again, the news can get even scarier and scarier. Who knows? We have 100% tariffs announced. What happens if they mention 200%, 300%, 1,000%? It can go as crazy as that. And the overall market can kind of react to that in the short term of things. That's why for me as an investor, I only put money that I don't need next year, the year after that. It's money in that long-term portfolio that I can ride out any wave. And if things get really, really, really cheap, I can double down or triple down. Now, the final topic I want to talk about is this. So, a very popular semiconductor analysis group, semi analysis, created Inference Max. And Inference Max is an overall benchmark, you can say, to test out TCOs and kind of test out inferencing benchmark, which is the biggest market in the overall AI space right now, and it's expected to be the biggest market share. And I've created a quick pros and cons of what we learned from there. So the pros are excellent performance per dollar. Some of the big takeaways is that AMD's GPUs are often more cost effective on key metrics of total cost and ownership. AMD's MI300 frequently beats NVIDIA's H100, largely due to lower upfront server costs. Competitive raw performance. AMD isn't just a budget option. Its GPUs demonstrated strong absolute performance, trading blows with certain NVIDIA products in certain workloads. Again, it's all certain, but it does showcase that there is competition. Improving software and stability. Semi analysis mentioned that just a year ago, software and the errors that were coming from AMD's were horrendous. Now things are improving and improving dramatically. AMD has really made this massive shift in improving its software solutions. Blackwell still leads, obviously, and NVIDIA still leads in software, but AMD is no slouch. And the final thing is just having this competition between AMD and NVIDIA just shows that AMD is somewhat on an equal footing in certain workloads. But to kind of put these two players together, it shows that these are the ones that you should keep a closer eye on. Now, some of the challenges that AMD has. The first is it majorly lags on the biggest models. So inferencing large models is way better on NVIDIA. And the main reason is NVIDIA has the massive NVL72 system, which connects 72 GPUs together. Obviously, MI450 is going to come out next year, and that will kind of eliminate this model or this con. But that's something that right now is a big issue. The second is software is still catching up. While it is improving, we talked about the improvements, it's still not there in forms of maturity of NVIDIA. And that's not going to change anytime soon. The next kind of cons is just NVIDIA's rack scale dominance. It kind of goes hand in hand with lagging in big models, but that's because having a full rack system demonstrates massive performance gains and does not have a direct comparable competitor right now. So NVIDIA leads in that dramatically. And weaker power efficiency in some cases. In direct comparisons, NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture was found to be about 20% more energy efficiency. Since power is a primary constraint in data center, this gives NVIDIA an operational cost advantage. So TCO, energy efficiency, while they are certain places where AMD leads, the overall space, NVIDIA still dominates in it, about 20% more energy efficiency. So there were some goods. I do believe the goods are way better than AMD was a year ago. Improving in software, competitive in hardware, learning and producing products, updates more frequently. Having most likely a rack scale solution with the 450 next year allows AMD to continue to innovate. So even though the stock is up 30%, a lot of great data has come out. And I do believe that data paints the probability of AMD being a $1 trillion company a lot sooner than maybe some were expecting. Obviously, AMD is giving up a nice position of its overall equity, 10% ownership to OpenAI. But I think it's like going to Shark Tank, right? You give a shark equity, but that shark can help you develop. can help you increase your market, can help you showcase your product to other customers as well, just by being that shark. And I think this was a shark style investment where it's obviously not a deal that Nvidia made. Nvidia's deal is way better, but it does open up the opportunity for AMD to succeed a lot faster. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.